another Aligner Insider podcast. Well, hello, everybody in podcast land. This is Dean Steinman, President of Ortho Marketing, and we are back with another podcast for you. And to my left today is the world famous, super incredibly talented orthodontist, educator, entrepreneur, and great Met fan, Dr. Barry Glaser. Hello,
Yeah.
Barry.
Hey, Dean. Thanks for the always for the lying introduction there. They're all
Lying.
lies, but I'll take it. Yeah, the Mets lost last night, but they're playing good ball considering they got they've got their AAA team
Whole
out
team on
there.
the injured list, exactly. But it's good, it's good to be a Met fan again. So
Oh
woohoo!
yeah, for sure. But yeah,
Exactly.
thanks for having me on it as always, and just wanted to tell everybody happy Juneteenth. It's Friday, June 18th, and we have our newest national holiday today. So, Dean, you had to send all your employees home, right?
We sure did, exactly. So everybody enjoy the long weekend there. So we're very excited to have a very special guest with us today on our podcast, and we have Dr. Chris Cetta with us, and Chris is a orthodontist. He's a entrepreneur. He's a podcast host, and he's a rockin' bassist, guitar musician as well. So we're really excited to have him on for a few minutes. So how you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Dean and Barry. Thanks so much for having me. Barry, I didn't realize you're a Mets fan.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. I was born in the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx, but my grandfather, who we lived down the street from, he always liked the underdog, and from the time the Mets came into existence in '62, he was a big Mets fan. So even though I lived pretty much in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, I was always a Mets fan. I left them. I have to admit that on I think it was Black Friday or Black Saturday. I can't remember what it was, but the day they traded Tom Seaver, for who did they trade him for? Like Doug Flynn and
Doug Flynn, Pat Zachary,
oh, good
and
lord.
Dan Norman.
Yeah, Dan Norman. Yeah, yeah, those three guys in
Those
the
three.
on the Mount Rushmore of baseball players. But actually, that was '75, and when they traded Seaver, I defected to the Yankees, which was actually perfect timing because that's when they brought in like Catfish Hunter and Reggie Jackson, and they went on that great run
Right.
of World Series. But then after like the fifth time Billy Martin was fired, and I guess that was like maybe '81, I decided to go back to the Mets, which was perfect
Because they
because
became
that's
great
when
too.
like
That's when they
Strawberry
got Keith
King Ed.
Hernandez. Yep.
Keith Hernandez. A couple of years later, Gary Carter, catch a rising star. So it was,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been true to the Mets ever since.
That's same exact story
Well,
as me.
I grew up a Mets fan too. I vividly remember 1986, and I mean, what an incredible year to be a Mets fan.
Right.
Oh
I
yeah,
have to admit, I don't keep up with them as much, but my dad and brother watch most of the Mets game, and they've been diehards. So that's pretty cool.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
at least we
yeah.
got
They're
all
playing
right.
well
So we
this
have
year.
an underdog team here today, so it's great. So let's go Mets. LGFM.
Exactly, exactly.
Excellent. All right. Well, Chris, thanks so again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Of
So we'll
course.
jump right in. So tell us, Dr. Chris Cetta, who is Chris Cetta? Give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, what made you become an orthodontist, and a little bit about your passion.
Oh, for sure. So, my name is Dr. Chris Cetta, for those of you who might not be aware, but I am an orthodontist. I practice with Blue Wave Orthodontics here in Florida and practice in Tampa and Bradenton. And originally grew up in northern New Jersey, a town called Randolph, sort of a suburb of New York City. And my father was an ophthalmologist, recently retired. Grandfather was a physician as well. And did my undergrad at Wake Forest in North Carolina. Ended up coming back to New Jersey for dental school at the former UMDNJ, now of course Rutgers. And after that, I actually did a GPR and practiced general dentistry for about 3 years. And then right around when the economy really took a nosedive in 2009, I decided it was a good time to go back to school and specialize. So I ended up going to Jacksonville University in Florida for my ortho residency. And once I was down there, it was a larger program, but I really enjoyed it. Very clinically focused. Just really got a taste for the Florida life. At the time, I was dating my now wife, Nicole, and she's a Jersey girl. So that sort of dragged me back to New Jersey for a while and practiced as an
What
ortho
exit?
associate for there, up there about 6 years. And and then it was just recently, within the last 3 years, that we decided to take a leap of faith and move back to Florida.
Hmm. Good for you. So you can play golf all year round.
You can, yeah. If I had time for golf, it's the perfect place for it, for sure.
Right. Exactly. And it's funny. In the north, and you're obviously a musician. We'll talk about that in a bit. But it's incredible the hotbed of bands that came out of northern Florida that people don't even realize what came out of there. Like from obviously not from the Tampa area, but Skinner and Tom Petty. Nobody realizes that everybody thinks Skinner's from Alabama, but they're not. They're Florida
Yeah,
boys.
a lot of them came from the Jacksonville area.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of the Allman Brothers,
Yep.
and they sort of were founded, in Jacksonville, even though I know they're more associated with like Macon, Georgia. Leonard Skinner was from Jacksonville, Tom Petty, Gainesville. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
there was a big music scene. I don't think as
Was.
much anymore, but
Yeah, it's tough. But now, once people hear that your band, it'll start again.
there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Um, so tell us a little bit about the type of practice that you have and your passion there. What is it that you like about being an orthodontist, and what makes you happy?
Oh man, I'm sure Barry shares the same sentiments, but I think we have the best profession. Being an orthodontist is really just incredible in terms of, what we do really does touch and affect people's lives. Being able to transform people's smiles, being able to give them that self-confidence. It's really humbling at times. It's inspiring. I really honestly love going to work every day. I think it's the best.
That's awesome. And so let's kind of dive right in a little bit further. So obviously, you have an entrepreneurial spirit as well. So let's talk a little bit about that. So in addition to being an orthodontist, you run a podcast. So let's give a little shameless plug for that. So tell us a bit about the podcast that you have.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I have my own orthodontic podcast called the Illuminate Orthodontic Podcast, and it's been out for a little over a year now. And I guess my sort of niche or sort of unique spin on the orthodontic podcast is, I tend to focus on innovators or inventors in the orthodontic profession. So to me, it's very interesting, and Barry and I were just chatting a little bit about this in the pre-interview about sort of the journey of how to bring a product to market, right? It sounds very simple when you just say, "Oh, I have an idea for this," and then having the final product, but the points along the way, it's actually a pretty difficult process to get it going. So I really did not have an orthodontic mentor in that space. I had sort of known of orthodontists that had, come up with products such as maybe a Luis Carrier with his Carrier Motion and SLX brackets, Dwight Damon. But I didn't really have access or know them per se. So I basically went outside the industry to learn quite a bit about how to bring a product to market and sort of follow that pathway to do it. So one of my goals with Illuminate is to help, future orthodontist inventors or people that maybe want to start a company and just sort of like hear the stories behind the inventions or the businesses.
All right. So now let's flip it around. So let's tell us a little bit about your story. So besides obviously being an orthodontist and running the podcast, you're an inventor as well. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, definitely. So the product I came up with is called Precision Aligner Buttons. And I co-invented this with Dr. Rich Kay of Morristown, New Jersey, in South Jersey. And this was probably back 2016. And very much like Barry, I'm a big Invisalign provider. I've always worked for either, I think it was called top 1% elite Align practices at the time. And what I was noticing back in 2016 is we were attaching the elastics to correct the overbites and underbites, basically with these little attachments called buttons on the teeth. Now, there's various ways you can do it. You can place either what they're called hooks, or basically like little slits in the aligners. Another way of doing it is they have these metal projections called buttons, that you can attach to the teeth. So the buttons that were currently developed were really sort of developed for braces back in the day, and they were meant more for the lingual surfaces or the insides of the teeth. Also, another way we would attach them is by taking the molar tubes from braces, often for the second molars, what we call the sevens, and attaching them that way. But long story short is that we were having a lot of patients come back and these attachments would debond. Barry, if you want to jump in, I'm sure you tried this a number of times and you probably ran into a similar issue, which is why you got away from them, right?
It's exactly why I got away from it, because I know probably it would not be talking about 2010, 2011, where folks like Bill Cotterman were using nail clippers before you could even order
Hmm.
precision cuts. They were using nail clippers to make like these little cuts into the aligners, but most of them were still putting some kind of button or bracket on the molars. And so that's how I learned to do it. And I started doing it, and it was like the emergencies started coming in, and I theorized that maybe because, well, not that kids follow the food restrictions anyway with braces, but I felt like we just particularly tell these kids you can eat whatever you want, and the buttons were just coming off all the time. And it's technique sensitive. With your staff trying to put them on, there's a
Hmm.
million reasons why they come off. The enamels, you get aprismatic enamel back there. It's hard to keep it dry, but for whatever reason, it was a problem. It was a problem with workflow. It was a problem with treatment. We weren't doing any kind of remote monitoring back then, Chris. So patients would sometimes come back 6, 8, 12 weeks later and say, "Oh, well, my buttons fell off the day you put it on. I haven't worn my rubber bands in 3 months." And now you're 3 months behind.
Right. Right.
So
And
very
and we had
quickly,
all the
right?
same, scenarios and emergencies. And, ultimately this was not just frustrating for the doctors, but it was frustrating for the patients too, right? Because the
Right.
parents had to pull the kids back out of school if they did come back to rebond them. Adults had to miss work and they weren't happy about that. So,
Exactly.
one day it just sort of came to me, well, what if the buttons themselves were a different shape and the base pad was almost like a semicircle cutout just to fit right within those precision cut windows, right? And apparently, no one had really thought of this before. And so at the time, I mentioned it to Dr. K, who I was working for, and he said, "You know what, Chris? That's a really good idea. You should do something about it." Right? And that's how these ideas start, right?
That's the easy part.
Uh,
So how'd this even come up, Chris? Just all of a sudden, just a light bulb went over your head and just said, "This is what we need." Like, how did this even fester?
it's funny. I don't know. I can't recall the exact moment that came to me, the eureka moment. But they often say that your most creative times happen when you're not thinking necessarily about the problem, right? It sort of happens there in your cerebral cortex. You might be in the shower, you might be on a bike ride, you could be doing something at the gym. So it probably was some other time that
On
that
the toilet,
concept
right,
just
Dean?
sort of
Dean was
was
Dean
in
was
my
thinking the
mind,
same
right?
thing I was.
Right.
But it's
um,
interesting, Chris, so
yeah,
that like you and I went like in completely opposite directions. Like, and it's a testimony to the fact that you're a positive thinker. Because I went, these buttons aren't working. I'm gonna use hooks or slits or something else. And you
right.
said the buttons aren't working. We need a better button, which I think is very, very interesting.
Yeah, so we went that direction with it, and just went back and forth for probably a month or two with Rich K. And I would work in his practice every Monday. And I remember every Monday I showed up at his office. He said, "Hey, what did you do about that idea?" Because I had another three patients come back with broken buttons. And every time I said to him, because I was working 5 or 6 days a week and trying to pay back my student loans, I said, "Rich, I've been so busy, I really haven't done anything or pursued it, and I don't even know the first step." And one day after he asked me again, I just said, "You know what, Rich, why don't we just partner up on this and go 50-50?" And he said, "Well, it's your idea, so we won't go 50-50." He's like, "I'll give you a majority of the idea in the company, and let's work on this together." And thank goodness I had someone to work on it with, because I think if it was just on my own, I would have really have never done anything with it. I think I'm the type that I've had ideas throughout my life, and I've always just been like, "Oh yeah, I had that idea, and someone already came up with it, right?" But
Hmm.
we were bound to make this happen. Like I just mentioned previously, we didn't really know what to do. We didn't have any inventors that we could just call up on the phone and say, "Hey, how'd you bring that product to market?" So believe it or not, 2016, YouTube wasn't quite as popular back then, but Amazon was around. So we went to Amazon and we searched for books on inventing. And fortunately, I came across this book called
Really?
One Simple Idea by Stephen Key. And it was perfect because it talked about licensing your ideas. And I had never really thought about this. But it made sense because the doctors I mentioned before, Dwight Damon, Louis Carrier, they licensed their product, right? They didn't form a whole company and do a startup in their garage and trying to mail these out on their lunch break.
Hmm.
So it just made sense because I knew I wanted to continue to practice as an orthodontist and didn't want to become the CEO of a button company, right?
Hmm.
We basically learned about the process through the book, and then there was they actually had almost like a coaching or a mentoring service that we signed up for, where we had a consultant that sort of just helped us walk us through the process.
Oh
And there
wow.
there were just a ton of challenges and hiccups along the way. The first one is you have to come up with sort of like a visual prototype. What's this product going to look like, right? So most orthodontists probably don't know CAD programs, right? Like AutoCAD. They probably don't happen to know mechanical engineers. So that was
Hmm.
the first step. And this program, InventRight, really helped us, lead us in the right direction. So we ended up using websites like Fiverr. If you've heard of Fiverr, there's another one called Upwork where
Sure.
you can find freelance mechanical engineers, and they basically sort of just came up with like a graphic representation of what this product might look like, right, and how it might attach to the tooth, fit within the aligner. And once we had that information, then we went and we were able to file a provisional patent with the USPTO, right? And so provisional patent gives you patent pending status for a 1 year period.
Hmm.
And during that time, that's when we're actually able to go out and pitch different companies, right? So, we did pitch, I'd say at least a dozen companies. And if you're going to bring a product to market, you have to get very comfortable with no,
Right.
right? You can't get discouraged by that. And it's very disheartening when you're passionate about something. We went to the big players. We went to Align and all the big manufacturers, and they thought it was a good idea, but maybe it just didn't fit with their company objectives or where they were headed with things.
I have two
Um,
questions at this point in the
yeah,
process. Number one is, so you didn't have a physical prototype at this point. You only had a virtual prototype.
exactly. Yeah, we just had a virtual or a visual prototype. I think the product was simple enough that people could say, like, okay, well, that makes sense how it would work, right? Because it was a larger base pad, more surface area,
Hmm.
contoured to fit the molar at the gum line. So it
Hmm.
wasn't a super intricate thing that we had to demonstrate how it was going to work.
Right.
I
So
think
the
it,
second question
yeah,
is, so
yeah.
you go into big companies with big budgets and big legal departments, and you're
Mhm.
this little guy. How do you protect yourself from them saying, Chris, we're not interested, and then, 3 weeks later knocking off your idea,
I was about to say the same
and
thing.
even though you're patent pending, them saying, you know what, you got $100 million, go sue us. So how do you protect yourself from, being honest, going into
Mhm.
a boardroom somewhere and not having your idea stolen?
Great question. So it is a little bit of a poker game, right? Because when you file a provisional patent, that is not made public by the USPTO.
Mhm.
So when you're presenting your product, you're not saying what your patent claims are. And without knowing their patent claims, they can't work around your product.
Mhm.
Now, it's not really worth it for a larger company to try to work around it, basically because one, these companies don't want to get dragged into court, even though they could probably bulldoze you, or as
Right.
maybe Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank says, like squash you like the cockroach you are. But they just don't want to get dragged into these IP, litigation lawsuits because it's time consuming. It's a lot of money. Also, in today's day and age of social media, it's just not good press if they're going out and working around doctors. It just doesn't look good for them.
Mhm.
Certainly, I do think having that provisional patent though is important. There's some people that might just go and try to have NDA signed, but I think having that provisional is an important step.
Mhm. Yeah, makes sense.
Mhm.
So what happened? So you were getting kicked out of these boardrooms, right? You were getting rejected. And then what
Yeah,
happened?
to be honest, most of it wasn't more boardrooms, but more just like 30-minute pitch calls with the different companies, and a lot of them they took the time to consider it, and maybe 30 days later, 60 days later, maybe they decided not to move forward, and that does get discouraging. But thank goodness we were with that Invent Right program, because they said, hey, this is all like normal. You're going to get no 25 times before you get a yes.
Hmm.
And our yes ended up coming from a company called Mid Atlantic Ortho, which Barry, you probably remember. They a few years ago were sold to Dynaflex,
Hmm.
and they thought this was a no-brainer idea. They thought it was a fantastic idea, and so we negotiated a licensing agreement, which took several months to get all that together, and then we moved forward with the product. And then, another obstacle we faced is we said, okay, great, here's our idea, here's our visual sketches. You guys sort of take it and run with it. But as it turns out, they didn't really have the information of how the molars were shaped at the gum line at the time. And we said, well, this information has to be available somewhere. And they did a bunch of research and contacted other companies. No one really had this information.
Hmm.
So we sort of tried to guess on the shape of Invisalign's cutout windows, and that didn't work. They just really weren't fitting in the shape. So as it turns out, I was at a Christmas party, and my cousin's husband happened to work for Boeing at the time. It was a mechanical engineer. So I was explaining my concept to him, and he said, "Oh, I design parts for airplanes. This is just something for a tooth. This should be very simple."
Hmm.
So what we ended up doing is we gathered up a bunch of aligners, and we 3D printed the corresponding teeth to go with them. And we tried to use the iTero scanner to scan that in, but of course the aligners are clear. So we had to literally go in the back of the office, spray paint all the aligners so we could scan them all in. And then once we had everything digital, Jeff, our engineer, was basically able to reverse engineer the exact curve that Align uses for their precision
Oh,
cutout windows. And then we were also able to come up with the average molar surface. So we were able to get a really precise fit for these buttons.
No, it's fascinating. It's funny how
interesting.
things work out, right? Just have to find the right person at the right time.
Exactly.
It
It's
is. It
it's
is.
incredible. Yeah, and as a serial entrepreneur my whole life, it's interesting to hear these journeys. And obviously, when you mentioned this on your podcast, I'm sure the same thing. It's great to be able to listen to what other people have gone through and learn from their mistakes and their success, and how to put that into your own business model and business plan there. And what's the one thing that you learned in this journey that you would suggest or give to heart somebody that it wants to jump into the entrepreneurial world?
Like I said, just don't give up. If you believe in your idea, you believe in your passion. Just because you encounter a couple people that maybe aren't seeing it, just keep going. Certainly, if you end up getting 100 no's, then maybe you're not on to something.
Right.
But I would say just really keep at it and believe in yourself.
Excellent. Um, Tell us a little bit about what keeps you up to date with trends, information, motivation. Is there a particular website or book or podcast that you go to that just gives you more information, education, motivation that you could suggest to somebody out there?
I'm sure Barry is the same way, but I try to be an observer of orthodontics as well. So I'm a listener of numerous podcasts, including yours. So thank you for having me on.
Sure.
I also listen to Glenn Krieger's Orthopreneurs podcast, Kyle Fagula's Digital Orthodontist, Leon Klempner's People in Practice. Um, Blair Feldman's podcast is fantastic too, the In Your Face podcast. So I happen to have at least a 30 to 40-minute commute, so that's a great time for listening to podcasts. I'd say that's a big resource. I attend or used to attend a lot of in-person meetings, so that's a great way for keeping your finger on the pulse of industry trends as well. And I follow all the various Facebook groups, which I know Barry, you're in those too. So whether it's Orthodontic Pearls, Orthopreneurs, I know you have your own Facebook group as well. I mean, all those I think are great ways for just keeping an eye on the trends in orthodontics.
Great. Now, speaking of trends, what do you put? Let's put on your glasses there, and what do you see that's going to come down the pike in the next 12 to 18 months in the orthodontic industry, as far as new trends and maybe technology as far as platforms across the board? Something that is just on the cusp, or something that you see is really needed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I'm going to sort of be speaking here from the lens of more observer and not necessarily things I am using in the practice. I think some of the trends that are now maybe sort of towards the middle of the adoption curve. 3D printing and in-house aligners. I mean, that has been out now for a couple of years. I think that's a big trend. Remote monitoring. Barry, I know you speak for dental monitoring. Also, there's Adam Schulhoff's Grin is out there. I think that's been around for a while. But in terms of like going into the future, I see this big trend of different products that are coming out sort of for orthodontists by orthodontists. And I don't think there's an exact name for that movement. Of course, I think we're all sort of alluding to Damon John's FUBU brand, but I don't think Fobo really has a ring to it. But just looking at different products, whether it's John Pham and Embrace, or Brandon Owen, KL Owen, Alfred Griffin with Light Force, I see a movement of doctors going back to developing products, whereas I think 10 to 15 years ago we sort of relied just on the companies for coming up with stuff, and then whatever they gave us we sort of worked with.
Hmm.
So that's one trend I see. Another big trend is digital treatment planning and appliance design. So of course, with ClinCheck, it's been 20 years now since we've been doing this. And maybe for our fixed appliance cases, certainly Insignia has been around for a while. There's been a couple others, but I'm starting to do more and more digital treatment planning for my braces cases. Reason being is I find, at least in my hands, that I seem to just be getting better results where I'm really loving the finishes, where I can get things dialed in, get those marginal ridges leveled, get the occlusion really socked in. Not to say you can't do it more of a classic way with wire bending and finishing and detailing. I certainly spent probably at least 8 years doing it that way. But for me, I just really love the ability to treatment plan everything from a digital perspective. So those I
Interesting.
would say are probably
Uh,
like the two major trends going forward.
Great. Two more questions for you. You're
Yes, sir.
putting up a billboard in Times Square today.
Hmm.
What does it say?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm gonna have to steal that one. you know, I I think the challenge right now that we're facing in the orthodontic profession is, sort of establishing our value. I think in some ways we've become commoditized as much as we don't want it to be that way. Looking at the DTC companies, which you all know the names, I think the challenge is really trying to educate the consumer why we're different and why we're worth that extra money. And in some cases, we might not even be charging that much more than some of these companies.
Hmm.
So we were talking about podcasts earlier. I heard Chris Benson a couple months ago on the People in Practice podcast, and he had a great insight. Chris is a super smart guy, but he said, I think in the future, instead of having more full treatment or comprehensive cases, it might actually, the trend might be for more like limited cases, right, where we're just treating the social six or maybe just addressing
Hmm.
that one tooth. And certainly that's something I'm seeing in my practice. We have a large percentage that are adults that come in for treatment, whether it's parents or maybe not parents, maybe just other adults coming in. And they've already had braces once. Maybe they even already did Invisalign once. And I don't know whether it's doing Zoom calls and working from home, or more Facebook and Instagram photos, but they're starting to really be more aware of their smile and their teeth. And maybe they want to do something about it, but they don't want to spend $5,000 or $6,000 when they've already had orthodontics several times.
Hmm.
So what we've really come up with is offering sort of a plan, and whether it's in an Invisalign Express type situation, some people might be doing in-house aligners for this, to offer a package that's right around maybe just under that $3,000 price point, that sort of competes with a Candid Bite Smile Direct Club, but at the same time they're actually getting treated in an office, diagnosed by an orthodontist. So I know I didn't answer your question exactly what goes on that
Not yet.
billboard, but I think we need, as a profession, we can be better about maybe educating the consumers about that. Barry, do you have any thoughts on this?
Got it.
I think I have mixed feelings. So I offer something in my office. We call it Fix My Smile. When patients come in, you get the Fix My Smile, or you get the Fix My Smile and Fix My Bite. And
Mhm.
that's almost exclusively an adult thing, because really, I still, whether I'm a traditionalist or not, when a teenager comes in, I'm looking for an ideal, or as close to an ideal result as I can. Like, I don't. When was the last time you treatment planned, let's say, a teenager and said, "Oh, we'll just leave your overjet, but we're just going to straighten your front teeth"? I mean, that mindset isn't there. But having said that, we've got a lot of adults, just like you say, they see themselves on Zoom. They've been through it once or twice before, and I'm perfectly fine, with those, sort of limited your treatment options. But I'm still kind of grappling with ways that I'm not, like, maybe at best breaking even, because it's easy to say, oh, limited treatment, we're going to see them a couple of times and they're going to be done, and then dealing with the reality where they're not happy. This one tooth isn't moving, or this, I don't know. I mean, you still wind up seeing them for substantial number of visits sometimes, and
Mhm.
I'm still trying to come up with a model that gives them, because I still want them to get red carpet service. It's like, it's
Sure.
easy to say, well, we're going to kind of give you this quickie treatment and straighten out one tooth, but it never seems to be, and I should say never, but frequently, especially when it comes to adult patients, it never seems to be that easy. So and on top of that, also, the lab fees are substantial. So, you know whether you're outsourcing your aligners, to someone like Align, or you're making them in house, there's still substantial upfront costs. I love when people say, Chris, oh, only cost me, $3 to make an aligner, but it really doesn't, because I got to spend money on your printer, you got to spend money on your staff,
Hmm.
make printing those models, processing them, sucking down the plastic, trimming the plastic. So it doesn't really cost you $3 to make an aligner, unless your staff is doing it for free, which I don't think
Right.
they are. So I still haven't come up with a model that allows me to be, I think, at least reasonably profitable versus the volume of patients and chair time. So, and my Fix My Smile price is $39.99. Now, I don't know how, whether maybe the cost of living is still higher in Westchester, and like my staff salaries are higher than it is down in Florida, but $29.99, I mean, every penny counts. So I'd be interested to see, like, how you feel that you can actually, it's worth your time and profit to do those cases. Do you know what
For
I mean?
sure. And just to circle back to something you said, to clarify, we're really only offering this option to, adults, or maybe,
Right,
18-year old and up, right?
right.
To me, a teen case, we're still just really presenting full comprehensive treatment
Yeah,
and fixing the
agreed.
occlusion. Um, you know, I did mention the term express, but actually, since we're both Invisalign providers, we typically will put it through as a moderate case, right? Because we get a
Hmm.
significant discount on that, and that includes a refinement.
Right.
And for me, I still feel like at least most of my Invisalign patients need one refinement. For the most part, I am able to keep it to a single refinement. Of course, there's always exceptions.
Well, that's because you
But
read my
even
book.
That's
You read
right.
the book.
Uh, Even for these limited cases, you're right. They're still like, well, that one tooth maybe isn't quite there, and then you need to address it. But
Right.
I guess the way I look at some of these cases too is that you're sort of establishing that bond with the patient, and even if you're only doing a limited or fix my smile treatment on them, what if they come in with their kids, right?
Right.
And they bring more full comprehensive patients. So you're sort of establishing your reach within the community that way.
Mhm.
Even it may not be as profitable as a comprehensive case, but as orthodontists, if we turn these away, you know where they're going now.
Right.
There
Right.
was never that option before.
Yeah. Agreed.
Good answers, guys. Two more questions, but another two. Number one, what makes Chris Cetta smile?
Oh, lots of things. One of my passions is music. I know we were going to talk about it, so let's dive into that.
Okay.
And both you guys are musicians too, so let me turn the tables on you. Let's talk about some of your favorite bands.
Let me just to qualify something. Dean is many things, but a musician is not one of them.
He's a
Was I too
wannabe.
generous
Apparently,
with that
Dean.
term?
Apparently, he hasn't seen any episodes of Karaoke Dean yet.
Yeah, I'm a wannabe. I lost my sense of musical hearing a long time ago. My,
But
my
he
dau-
loves. But you know what the funny thing is, Dean, you still love to sing, don't
I
you?
sure do, and I'm not. No,
Yeah.
you're not going
Go
to
for
stop
it.
me. You're not going to stop me. So,
Yeah. Maybe
um,
we'll get a little squeeze
we're-
box or dirty deeds done cheap if
I,
we're lucky here,
yeah, I mean, that's
Chris.
not a bad idea. um, so, let's talk about music. All right, let's talk about this for a few minutes here. Um, Mount Rushmore of songs. What are your top four songs of your Mount Rushmore?
Ooh, that's a good question. Uh,
Or
so
even bands if you want to go, but bands. How about that? Your top
let's
four
go
bands.
bands. Yeah, let's go bands. So I am definitely what people would probably call an old soul in terms of my musical taste. There's some modern acts I like, but for the most part, I think I like music that was probably more prevalent of my parents' generation, and I was able to get a lot of like vinyl records from them, and so my influences. Oh man, top four. I'm probably going to go with Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Allman Brothers would be my four there.
Interesting.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, that's a good nice mix there.
What's yours,
Yeah.
Bear?
So, yeah.
What's mine? I definitely have to put the Beatles up there. Um, but I think I also have to maybe put, it's not really a band, but probably put someone like BB King. Well, maybe not necessarily the great. I mean, he's a great player, obviously, but not necessarily, let's say, the greatest, but certainly the most influential.
Hmm.
Um, probably have to put Elvis on there.
Good.
And I don't know what
Great
I have put the
choice.
fourth one. I don't. Yeah, maybe I'd still have to. You guys are gonna last, but I'd still have to maybe put the Boss on there, put the Street Band on there. I think just for
Yes.
the amount of time. So I knew I was gonna get a.
Okay.
Listen, I didn't say
I'm a
ABBA
big
at least.
Springsteen fan. I have almost all his albums on vinyl.
One of the
Yeah.
greatest concerts you've ever see live is Bruce Springsteen. I mean, he jams
Hmm.
for 4 hours plus every single time. It's the energy he has is incredible. I wish I had
Hmm.
that energy at 25, and he's got it at 65, or
Yeah.
whatever he is now. Which is interesting. It's great how everybody has different unique tastes, and obviously we're old souls here as well. And mine is the Grateful Dead, the Who,
Great choice.
Eric Clapton, and Queen.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
I
Yeah.
I
Little
think we all
eclectic
have
there.
similar musical tastes here.
Yeah, little, and none of those bands or players have been around. Have come anything within new in 30 years or more. But
I know.
it's what brought us up. It's what's in my soul, as you said. And I just started getting into new music lately again over the last five, not obviously in the last year, but the last 5 or 6 years. And there's a lot of great new stuff out there. There's a lot of great bands that really get your toes tapping, like Cage the Elephant or the Record Company. If you ever heard of them, or the
Hmm.
Revivalists.
I haven't-
You know,
Okay.
these there's some really, really good
Oh,
bands out
great ones
there.
to check out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could share
Well,
some of
Barry,
the
you
stuff with you.
mentioned the blues. I'm a huge fan of the blues, and I love
So,
R&B, soul, funk. Stevie Wonder is one of my favorite artists.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, so besides just the rock side of things, I love all that classic stuff too. So
So Chris, when you walk into a guitar store, right, and
yes.
you pick up an electric, not an acoustic, you pick up an electric and you plug it in, and
Hmm.
do you have like three or four like guitar store songs that you can competently play and not humiliate yourself in? If you, let's say you got that Strat sitting behind you, and people can't see, but you
Yeah.
got that nice Strat. What kind of Strat is
Hmm.
that, by the way? Is that a vintage or is that a new one?
It's actually what they call a parts caster, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was
Mm-hmm.
custom made. It's not a true Fender Strat. It was made by USA Custom Guitars. But the cool part is that I got to pick out, the body, the wood for the body, the neck, the pickups, the bridge. It's
Nice.
got what's called a bird's eye maple neck on there, so it's like
Mm-hmm.
this unique wood
Love the maple neck.
Fralin pickups. But yeah, at this point, I really don't play as much guitar. I might have mentioned at some point I play with this group Relapse, which is Cole Johnson, Kyle Fagala, Chris Teeters, and Brian Anderson. Give them a quick shout out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being the bass player in the band, I don't think I play as much guitar as I used to.
Mhm.
So if I went into a guitar store, do I have a lick to play? Certainly not Stairway to Heaven.
No
No, no, you
Stairway.
I might
can't play
bust
Stairway to
out
Heaven. Every guitar dean,
Black
every guitar
Dog
store
or
has a
Over the
No
song
Hills
that's
Far
Stairway.
Away.
no
No
Stairway.
Stairway, exactly.
Black Dog?
Exactly. Black
Nice.
Dog, yep.
So are
Yep,
you a
Oh,
can play
bassist or a
that.
guitarist to heart?
Great question. So my first instrument was guitar, which I picked up in high school. Actually, it was my senior year in high school. And then when I got to college, I realized that everybody and their brother and their mother played guitar, and they either needed a drummer or a bass player.
hmm.
And I was around a lot of great guitar players, so I guess I drew the short straw and I picked up the bass. But I've
It's kind of
enjoyed
like
it
being
ever
a
since.
catcher, right? Like the
Yeah, you're
best way
right.
to the major
Exactly.
leagues is being a cat. Nobody wants
Right.
to be catcher, so if you
Right.
want to
No
get to
one
the
wants to
major
be the
leagues,
catcher, right?
be a
Yep.
catcher.
But it's funny. A lot of people will think of bass as, oh, it's just guitar with two less strings. But the way you play it, obviously, is totally different. Most people will play with their fingers instead of with the pick, and just being sort of like locked in and being more in tune with the rhythm and sort of being that glue between the rhythm and the melody is really important in bass playing.
That's awesome.
So if you're to choose between Flea and John Entwistle,
Oh wow!
who do you pick?
Certainly two of my favorites, right? John Entwistle, of course, the bass player of the Who. Thunderfingers, I think, was his nickname, right? Entwistle.
Yep.
But
I'm
just he
forgetting
has
that.
some incredible bass runs, and him and Keith Moon, and just listening to the two of them,
Oh, incredible. Yep.
Oh yeah.
yeah, just in very different than John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. John Entwistle had a lot more flourishes. But Flea, I mean, he is so funky and has such great bass lines too. I mean,
Incredible,
he I
right?
think sort of built on what Bootsy Collins was doing with James Brown and P Funk,
Bootsy, yeah.
and sort of brought it into the next level. So it's really hard to choose. I love them both.
That's great. All right, now finally, last question, which as far as what you love even more, and this is our go-to here. All right, Reese's peanut butter cup or Hershey bar?
Oh, I'm a peanut butter cup guy. I
Yeah,
just
we're still
love the peanut butter and chocolate.
batting 1,000, Dean.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
far, we are I think 100-0 as far as the record goes for that. So that's awesome. Great, Chris. I really appreciate you joining us. We're gonna wrap it up now.
Thank
So
you
if
so
anybody
much, Dean. Yep.
has any questions, want to reach out to you, what's the best way to somebody to contact you, or to just get information about about your podcast, as far as your products? Is there a particular email or website or something they should
Yeah,
go
for
to?
sure.
No.
Certainly feel free to connect with me on social media. I'm on all the major platforms. Another way, if you'd like to learn more about the precision aligner buttons, it's precisionbuttons.com. As far as the podcast, that's available on all the major platforms. Also, illuminateorthopodcast.com. My email address, if you'd like to reach out, is drcetta@gmail.com. And look forward with connecting with you all.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris. We really appreciate you joining us. Everybody out there in podcast land, thank you much for listening, for being a follower of Aligner Insider, and to hopefully you'll learn something good today and you're smiling. So, with that said, everybody be safe, be happy. Happy Juneteenth to everybody, and everybody be safe and enjoy. Happy smiles. Thank you. Bye bye.